Firstly, why would you want to learn a language like Japanese? You have to remember 2 different types of alphabets. Don't get me started with kanji. The meaning of words can change by pitch accent. The counting system is different depending on the item in question. It's not the same grammatical order as English. The language changes if you're talking to a family member, your boss, your friends, a customer, your pets. Did I make you reconsider? Don't be afraid. If you get past the obstacles, learning Japanese is quite fun. In saying that, I can't speak fluently and definitely not calling myself an expert. You should probably check out guys like Matt vs. Japan. Admittedly, I've been learning off and on for 4 years. Accumulatively, I might only be a few months in serious learning. But here's the 5 steps I'd give myself if I theoretically lost all of my Japanese abilities tomorrow. Step 0. Why? I'm here to ask you, why do you want to learn Japanese? It could be as simple as wanting to go to Japan for a holiday, maybe live there one day, watching anime without subtitles, converse with the Japanese people. I ask why to gauge how likely you're going to stick to this journey of language learning. Japanese's difficulty is one of the harder languages to learn if you speak English due to how it's structured. It's not going to be overnight or months. It may take years if you're willing to pay the price. If you don't have a strong enough why, the likelihood you will stay long enough until you see the results is low. Then why are you studying Japanese, Denzel? It's quite a hard question for me to answer now. I think I had a why, but it slowly evolved to become what is. If I had to give an answer, it's the positive feedback loop when I understand something in Japanese. In terms of language learning goals, here's an exercise to attempt. Try not to understand what I'm saying in English. Impossible, right? Even if you wanted to, you couldn't turn off your brain automatically interpreting the meaning of my words. That's sort of the point I want to get with my Japanese, and perhaps the equivalent of an Asian person's broken English when outputting. Step 1. Learn your kana. Back in grade 7, I had the grace to study hiragana for a whole term. Later in grade 10, I forced myself to learn katakana to complete the 2 alphabets and keep up with the curriculum. Phonetically, they both sound the same. What symbol is used to represent each sound is what differs. A lot of people may be discouraged to learn Japanese because you'll have to learn 2 separate alphabets. To that I say, is it not the same with lower and uppercase letters? Again, throughout this journey of learning a foreign language, do not hate the game. How will I remember each symbol then? Imaginative memory. Look up how to learn hiragana or katakana. Like how I learnt my hiragana in grade 7, with each symbol will have its own story to remember by. For example, A looks like antenna, I looks like a group of eels, U looks like someone pulling something. The mistake I made was not using stories with my katakana. I used pure memory and a technique that primary school children use. Look, say, cover, write, check. Look at what you want to write, say it aloud, cover it, try recalling by writing it down, then check if you wrote it correctly. I highly suggest using handwriting when learning these characters. Knowing how to write will help with what it looks like through muscle memory. At most, it should probably take you about a week if you're serious to learn hiragana and katakana. Let me remind you, you feel overwhelmed with having to remember 46 hiragana and katakana characters due to unfamiliarity. It would be completely unreasonable to not know your kana if you studied it over and over again. Also, do not rely heavily on romaji. It should be used to help you type in Japanese and initially with the pronunciation of kana. If you're learning the reading of a kanji or word, read from the kana, not the romaji. A special note. Learn from my mistake and ingrain into your brain the difference between shi and tsu. I don't know how many times I get those 2 mixed up. Step 2, learning kanji. You thought there were a lot of kana. Wait until we get to kanji. I think in high school Japanese class, kanji was the bane of everyone's existence. It's not like English where you can sort of work out the spelling of a word by how it sounds. In Japanese, you cannot base the looks of a kanji by how it sounds. Especially in school, I defend kanji much to the sulking of my classmates. I'll use an example sentence. Haha wa ookii ie o motte imasu. My mother has a large house. Don't mind my bad pronunciation. Let me write it with just kana on screen. Specifically note how this character can be pronounced ha or wa. The importance of kanji is separating words and making them easily readable. Originally, I studied kanji separately from vocabulary, from a book called Studying the Kanji by James Heisig. His method of learning was using memory from the imagination, attaching a story to an abstract symbol like learning kana. Then, throughout the book, he would build up kanji by using previous learnt symbols as radicals. Radicals being the smallest unit that makes up a kanji. Now, I mostly study kanji within the context of vocab. It's meaningless to study a symbol when I don't use it as a word. Also, there are 2 schools of thoughts around kanji. You recognize it as someone's face or individual radicals. I'm taking this idea from Matt vs. Japan. When you see someone's face, you see it as a whole, not picking at individual features to let you know That's John. Think of otoko, meaning a man. It's made up of two radicals, the symbol for rice field and the symbol for power. Now, you can either see, oh, rice field plus power means a man, or you can recognize it as just the whole as, oh, otoko means man. So learn kanji from vocab study and active immersion. This is an ongoing process because there's like over 2,000 kanji. Do not fret. Think of them as symbols for words. Like you probably know over 2,000 words in English, so why is it different with Japanese? Step 3. Prime your consumption of media. The ultimate goal is consuming Japanese media as the main source of learning the language. Your output will be helped by the amount of input you do. However, so we're not going in blind, I suggest doing the following. Step 3.1. Review basic grammar. Having a basic understanding for how sentences are formed and what they mean will help when immersed in the language. I recommend Refold's Grammar Primer, which can be found in the description. For a more deep dive into grammar, I read Tai Kim's A Guide to Japanese Grammar, which can be found in the description as well. With grammar as well, do not use it for formulating sentences. What it ends up having is you form a grammatically correct sentence, but it'll sound unnatural. Only through enough immersion will you get a feel for what sounds the most natural to express your intended meaning. Step 3.2, review vocabulary using Anki cards. What is Anki? Anki is a spaced repetition system, SRS for short, and it will become your best friend when learning new vocabulary. Essentially, think of flashcards. You will be given a card with a new vocab word. Once you can recall the meaning of the card, the system will automatically show you the card when you are most likely to forget it. If you've ever taken practice tests, recall of information tends to be the strongest reinforcer for learning and memorizing new things. To start, I recommend checking out Refold's 1K deck that's in the description. I swear I'm not sponsored by them. Even look up Japanese 2K vocab Anki deck and you'll get some results. The end goal is actually sentence mining, but I don't do that at the moment, so it might be a different concept to cover in a video. Step 4, find a target language media. If learning vocab words and basic grammar are the supplements you take before going to the gym, consuming Japanese media is working out. Your choice of media will be your golden ticket to become proficient in learning Japanese. We'll use the input model that babies use to learn language. If you surround yourself with the language long enough, you give the brain enough input to construct a language model to interpret meaning. As a beginner, you have not surrounded yourself enough in the language. Let's change that by consuming media that's in Japanese. First, to consider what vocab you will need to learn. Consuming a Japanese slice of life anime will not have the same vocab as a sci-fi genre or a Japanese news station. What words do you want to learn that you will use? Well, to make it easier, literally watch stuff that you already like in Japanese. We want immersing to be as fun as possible to continue the positive feedback loop. Personally, I like slice of life anime, Ghibli movies, Makoto Shinkai stuff. Or if I'm in the car, I'll put on a random Japanese podcast to listen to Japanese while commuting. Think anime, news, radio news, YouTube, manga, light novels, podcasts, dramas. There's never been a time to learn a language with access to native speaking content with the internet. The only caveat is you cannot use English subtitles when consuming the media. Why? If you quickly glance at the English subtitles, the meaning is automatically transferred to you, rather than interpreted from the Japanese. There's a term in the language learning community called language ambiguity. Essentially, you will have no idea what the fuck is going on, which is fine. Focus on getting the meaning rather than following the plot. Step 5, be consistent. Show up every day ready to learn and consume Japanese content. Whether it's consistently reviewing Anki cards and never missing a day of reviews, or allocating a half an hour of immersion. If you do it long enough, it becomes a matter of time until you start understanding bits and pieces, and language is very much use it or lose it. I have a mate who is forgetting his hiragana and katakana because it has been such a long while since he had to write or read them. You might reach a point where there is no turning back. You have made practicing Japanese ingrained into your routine that it will never be missed a day. Start small. I learned 5 new Anki cards a day, then ramped it up to 10. And I only watched an episode of anime a day. Principles to live by. No output. A change I want to see in high school curriculums. Do not start outputting Japanese when you do not have sufficient input. To minimize the mistaken output, we must focus on the input. Like this rule Tai Kim said in his book. If you don't know how to say it in Japanese, don't even say it at all. Input is also important in understanding how the language sounds. Particularly with Japanese, you can hear the foreign accent if words are pronounced using the phonetics of the English language. Still, I violate this rule sometimes when I have a Japanese person come through the golf shop I work at. There's also the mistake of believing English can be translated word for word to Japanese. Some examples I can think of is expressing having a headache, atama ga itai, which translates to my head hurts or I have a headache. Try outputting too early and it'll be hard to reverse mistakes due to habit. So don't do it. Listen more. An area of weakness when it comes to learning Japanese is the listening component for me. Because we have a different phonetic system we refer to, the sounds of the Japanese language might seem undistinguishable. Then you have small quips like in English. For example, I want to becomes I wanna. Because you're using the English language model, the brain automatically translates I wanna to I want to. Then like words, there are words with multiple meanings that need to be put into context for one of their chosen meanings. This is not an issue when doing active input, a little when using SRS. It's like using homonyms. I can say the word night or night, but you won't know unless I'm using it in context. However, because you know that night is used more than night, subconsciously the proclivity to go with the night time is much higher. And with more time immersed in the language, you can start distinguishing sounds into separate words because the brain has gotten enough input to use a language model to interpret. So, here's your study plan. Learn hiragana and katakana, review basic grammar, get Anki and download your 1K, 2K common word decks, choose the media you want to consume Japanese from, consistently immerse yourself in the language, and do not output for a long time until you can start understanding most of the stuff you're consuming. The only difference I would make in my journey is heavily focusing on consuming media, making a consistent effort in implementing systems that make it as easy as possible to consume Japanese media and doing your SRS card reviews.